Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest threats to come from the US President's cabal regarding Iran deal, and how we must be mad to pay attention to it. Though I suspect pay attention to it we will. But first, if you'd like to receive notifications of daily news and political commentary, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, President Trump has, for his own reasons, got it in for Iran. After years of the threats of nuclear proliferation, Iran and various other countries, including the United States, were able to support a deal that would mean Iran turned away from the path of nuclear weapons in return for an easing of economic sanctions. Then along came Trump and wiped his arse with the deal. In one fell swoop, he dragged the honour of his country through the mud by reneging on a deal agreed only 3 years before and destabilising the Middle East while he was at it. But the accusation that it was Iran that had reneged on the deal was completely without basis. Not a single other nation, or even the United States that wasn't the bit controlled by the president, agreed with that assessment. And so until very recently, the deal held together, sort of, as other nations accepted that Iran had followed it in good faith. But the US imposed its own sanctions on Iran, and they had a wider effect as well. Obviously, the US, being the economic behemoth, meant that it was always going to be biting for Iran. But it had a knock-on effect. It meant, for example, British businesses could not deal with Iran, even though the UK government wasn't telling them not to. And that's because the US uses its considerable might in such situations to effectively blacklist not just US companies, but any company that deals with Iran. They could be, even a British company could be subject to huge fines, which, if it has any trade link at all with the United States, it would fall foul of. Such is the economic power of America, that their sanctions effectively mean global sanctions for a nation. And now Richard Goldberg, who is an ally of Donald Trump, has been threatening the UK for its stance on Iran. In the nicest possible way, of course. He's talked about the difficulties Boris Johnson faces in trying to get a deal with both the EU and the US. Of course, this is impossible, as the US president has made it clear that there will be no US deal if we have any sort of deal with the EU. But Goldberg was trying to suggest that Brexit supporters don't like the Iran deal, and so Johnson should pull out of it on that basis. Now, the timing of this might also seem a little strange, given that Iran itself has pulled out of the deal, of course, based on America's recent actions. There isn't really much left of it anyway, but I think this is because the European powers, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, have tried to restart talks for a deal. In other words, they're wanting this to go through a bit of a process of arbitration, with the intention of rescuing the Iran deal. Now, the president doesn't really want this, again, for his own political reasons. But, the idea that Brexit supporters are opposed to the Iran deal is a complete nonsense. Sure, there is a core of them that quite like Donald Trump and will absolutely want our government to do whatever he says. But they are small in number, even amongst Brexiteers, and even they are not opposed to the Iran deal. Sure, they'll sacrifice Iran for the sake of doing whatever Donald Trump wants, but they don't themselves have any objection to the Iran deal. In fact, the last time Trump came over, he was actually asked to tone down his support for Brexit and for Johnson, because the man is deeply unpopular in the UK to Remain and Brexit supporters alike. And when it comes to the Iran deal specifically, there has never been even a small protest against it in this country in the 5 years that it's been operating. In fact, in the UK, there is considerable sympathy for Iran regarding the deal, not necessarily Iran in general. Obviously, there is this East versus West type mentality there. And of course, any British sympathy for Iran, which may naturally emerge and often does, is frequently tempered by their behaviour towards the UK at times. For example, imprisoning British citizens and arresting our ambassador have done little to endear them to the British public. But there have been no reports of groups calling on the government, no protests against the Iran deal or calling on the government to abandon the Iran deal at all. If anything, people are concerned about the situation in the Middle East. So it's a simple case of a Trump crony threatening the UK's precious US trade deal if we don't behave like a good little servant. But it is somewhat like threatening someone by saying, if you don't do what I say, then I'm not going to break your leg. Okay then. Because the US trade deal that's been proposed is quite appalling for the UK. Goldberg refers to a free trade deal. But that's not what's on the table. That's not what's been proposed by the United States. The US trade deal demands that we accept American exports which currently don't meet safety standards. I mean, that part of it you could argue is like a free trade deal. But our various public bodies and American public bodies as well, most especially the NHS in the UK, are forced to prioritise the purchase of goods manufactured in the US, even when they're much more expensive. The terms of the deal will be this: if you need to buy a product and that product is manufactured in the US, that's the one you're buying. And the effect of that, of course, is to increase American imports in Britain, for which, of course, we pay. We buy them. That's what we're buying off America. And the US makes money. And to reduce our exports to America, which is how we make money, exporting things, selling things. So it's a deal that means we pay more for goods, but we get to sell less in return. I mean, what sort of booze-addled brain would ever consider that good business? Frankly, my response to this threat would be to sarcastically say, oh no, what do you mean if we don't join you in screwing over the Middle East, that we won't get to have you screw us over? Disaster. It's also a fairly pointless threat because not only will Boris Johnson do everything Trump tells him to, he has already been shilling for him in Iran. Our ministers have been backing Trump 100%, even going so far as to blaming Iran for the death of their own general. And Johnson was calling just this week for a new Trump-Iranian deal. So although officially the UK is on board with the other European countries in trying to restart the talks to get the Iran deal back on track, he personally is calling, oh, let's have a Trump deal. Trump's good at making deals. We'll have him make an Iran deal. And, you know, and finally, that final point is, I had to laugh at this. I read one report on this which alluded to Boris Johnson having to straddle the conflicting pressures, it said, from Europe and America in search of an independent yet relevant foreign policy. What a pointless collection of words. Foreign policy can never be independent, even when you are a very powerful nation. But the idea that any of our policies, even domestic ones, will be independent now that we've decided to run out into the cold surrounding ourselves with wolves is utterly ridiculous. So anyway, I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.